Neil Smith's idea of there being no such thing as a natural disaster is not to be taken in a literal sense, but in a social and societal sense that governmental and social factors contribute to the unnecessary damage people, particularly lower-class minority people, suffer concerning weather-related and geologically related disasters. Neil Smith's "there's no such thing as natural disasters" was fueled in part by the Bush administration's responses to aid in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. Katrina ravaged the southern United States in 2005, flooding New Orleans after a levee broke. Smith did not agree with how the Bush administration handled aid to the city. He thought the administration acted in the interests of money and politics, not in the well-being of the people who live in New Orleans. Smith analyzes the 5 phases and aspects of a disaster, each contributing to how much damage will be caused in the end. These are causes, vulnerability, preparedness, results and response, and reconstruction. Smith gives 2 reasons for his claim of natural disasters not existing. He says the reason some people are harmed more by a disaster than others is a social calculus, a problem of social and racial inequality. He says blacks in New Orleans are lower class in social structure and income. As a result, they cannot afford to build storm shelters, prepare for storms properly, or to evacuate. The middle and upper class, however, can and do. Therefore, these higher classes are not harmed nearly as much as the lower classes. This results in the excessive damage the disasters cause to the lower class not to be natural, but avoidable. His second reason for his claim has to do with global warming. China and the United States are the 2 largest producers of carbon emissions in the world. Smith says statistically, storms have increased in number and strength over the past several decades. He says this correlation between greenhouse gas emissions and storm intensity isn't definitive proof that humans are causing these destructive storms, but it would be irresponsible to entirely dismiss this possibility, as he claims the Bush administration did. In my opinion, Neil Smith is an opinionated writer who has valid points, but is slightly biased. Starting with his claims of the non-existence of natural disasters, I think he's right about the inequality of classes of people, but I also think it's a choice of the lower classes to stay lower instead of working to become higher. I think you may have a point about the greenhouse emissions contributing to the weather, but I don't think it would be quite as drastic of a change as he does to the point where it would fuel a Category 5 hurricane, for example. Now for my opinions on his points around Katrina's aftermath. For one, the mandatory hurricane evacuation was given to everybody, including the ones who chose to stay. Neil claims they may not have been like the, quote, better off, end quote, who had cars to leave and money to pay for emergency hotels and supplies. The fact is, these people owned property in New Orleans. They had to pay for that and continue to pay taxes on it. They were not destitute. Some of them may have been homeless, but even then they still could have went north. Worst case scenario, all of these people could have hiked north and camped out in a tent in a field. Although I would be willing to bet money somebody would have opened their doors to them and let them stay. At least then, if they go north, they wouldn't be in the storm's path. What I find personally interesting is that the survivors wanted to be evacuated after the storm hit. Not that this isn't logical, of course they would want out, but I find it interesting that they had the opportunity to before and didn't. Then they expect the government to come help them and get mad when the government doesn't do it the way they want it to be done. They had been told before from Florida how bad the storm was becoming. It shouldn't have been a surprise. Hurricane Irma occurred during the beginning of September of 2017. It started near West Africa and grew rapidly. It became a Category 5 hurricane and slammed into Barbuda, parts of the U.S. and British Virgin Islands, Haiti, Puerto Rico, and the Dominican Republic. The storm made its way northwest to the eastern coast of the United States and downgraded to a Category 4 hurricane when it made landfall over Florida on September 10th. It weakened and finally dissipated over Tennessee on September 13th. Irma caused around $50 billion in damage to the United States. Neil Smith might argue that the severity of this storm was fueled by the increased amounts of carbon emissions produced by human industrial activity. I would not deny or confirm this, but I would not dismiss the possibility that this could be true, and I might advocate for the reduction of carbon emissions in the world. In conclusion, Neil Smith has many good points, but I don't agree with him that there is no such thing as natural disasters, because whether or not mankind contributes to them, they still happen without man's influence, sometimes at a moment's notice.